I always believed loyalty was a two-way street. When my father's health took a sudden downturn, the hospital visits and murmured conversations between doctors and nurses left me with the chilling impression that time and money were running out faster than we could contain them. My parents, weary and visibly shaken, sat across from me at the dining table one gray evening. Their faces were etched with worry, their hands trembling as though the weight of life itself had settled there. "Your dad's bills, they're piling up," my mother whispered, her voice soft yet sharpened with desperation. "We're drowning, sweetheart. Just this once. Please." I didn't hesitate. I was 28, still building a modest career, hardly flush with cash. But family was family. That night, with trembling hands, I logged into my account and transferred $2,700 to my parents. It was more than my monthly rent, more than what I had in reserve for emergencies, but their tearful gratitude convinced me I was doing the right thing. "You've saved us," my father rasped, his voice heavy with emotion. He squeezed my hand, eyes glossy. My mother nodded, whispering prayers under her breath, as though I had carried them across an abyss. I slept that night with an ache in my chest, but also with relief. Relief that I had stepped up when they needed me most. Relief that I hadn't turned away like some heartless stranger. The very next morning, though, the illusion began to fracture. I received a group text, sent not to me, but by mistake. My sister, my cousins, and even distant relatives were included. It was a photograph. A sparkling cruise ship, towering and glimmering beneath a blazing sun. Champagne glasses in hand, wide grins plastered across their faces, my family posed at the deck, and there unmistakably were my parents, radiant, carefree, and utterly unburdened. No tubes, no hospital gowns, no signs of financial ruin. Just cocktails, laughter, and the wide blue ocean. My chest tightened. I read the caption again and again. "Family vacation of a lifetime. Cheers to fresh horizons." The $200-700 I had sacrificed to keep them afloat had not gone to hospital bills. It had been funneled directly into this celebration. A celebration from which I was deliberately excluded. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. The betrayal wasn't in the money alone. It was in the cruelty of the deceit. They had looked me in the eyes, invoked sickness, invoked debt, and I, like a dutiful daughter, had shouldered it. Only to watch them sail away, laughing, while I stayed behind, the fool financing their escape. That was the day something inside me broke. And once broken, I knew there would be no return. I must have stared at that picture for an hour, my mind trying, and failing, to reconcile the scene before me with the trembling voices I had heard just days earlier. My father's labored breathing, my mother's whispered pleas, the trembling hands they had wrung across the table. All of it dissolved into theater. It wasn't desperation. It was rehearsal. As the group chat continued to buzz with photos and videos. Cocktails raised against sunsets, glittering decks lit for late night dances. I realized I hadn't simply been forgotten. I had been excluded. The empty chair at that table had been deliberate. My absence wasn't an oversight, it was an orchestration. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time, my younger sister leaned against my mother, both of them grinning in matching sun hats. My father stood proudly behind them, his arm draped around a cousin's shoulder. The caption read, "Couldn't have done this without the family pulling together." The bile rose in my throat. Family pulling together. No. Family tearing me apart, dollar by dollar, lie by lie. The storm inside me refused to quiet. I tried to call. Once, twice, then again. No answer. My messages remained unread. Their silence was more telling than words could ever be. They didn't want my voice disturbing their laughter. That night, I lay in bed replaying every interaction over the years. Every plea for help with rent. Every sudden car repair. Every whispered emergency that had arrived with the urgency of life and death, and always, always, I had stretched myself thinner, believing their need was genuine, believing loyalty was my duty. Now the truth stood before me, dressed in sequins and sunburnt smiles. I had been their financier, not their family. The rage that followed was slow, burning. It wasn't the kind that consumed you in a single outburst. It was colder, quieter, the kind that sharpens itself like a blade in the dark. My grief hardened into resolve. I began to dig. While they floated in luxury across turquoise waters, I scarred old bank statements, text threads, receipts. A pattern emerged, one I should have recognized years earlier. The hospital pay that matched a resort booking. The electric bill that coincided with new electronics deliveries. The unexpected repair that lined up with my sister's designer wardrobe spree. Every lie had left a paper trail, and I, foolishly diligent, had kept them all. By the time their cruise docked, my ledger was ready. And when their vacation glow faded, I intended to remind them, not only of what they had stolen from me, but of what they had truly cost. This wasn't about 2,700 anymore. This was about years. Years of trust siphoned away. Years of loyalty mocked and discarded. Years of playing the fool. And I had finally decided to stop playing. The cruise ended on a Sunday. By Monday morning, I stood outside my parents' house, the same front porch where I had once dropped off grocery bags during lean years, the same door I had unlocked countless times to rush over whenever they called. Now, the house looked different. Or maybe it was me. I knocked. My mother answered, still wearing the tan from her trip. Her smile faltered when she saw me. "Oh, you should have called first," she said quickly, her eyes darting behind her, as though she could hide the suitcases still stacked in the hallway. I stepped inside without waiting. The smell of salt water and perfume still lingered in the air. "You look rested," I said flatly. My father shuffled into the room, his laughter from some private joke still echoing. But when he saw the folder in my hand, his expression hardened. "What's that?" he asked. I placed the folder on the table, flipping it open. Bank statements, screenshots, receipts, dates circled in red ink like wounds. "This," I said evenly, "is proof that the money I gave you, for Dad's medical bills, was never used for hospitals. It was used for luxury cabins and all-you-can-drink packages." Silence fell heavy in the room. My mother's face flushed crimson, but she said nothing. My father cleared his throat. "You don't understand." "No," I interrupted, my voice steady but sharp. "I understand perfectly. You lied. You manipulated. You treated me like a wallet instead of a son." My sister, who had just wandered in, let out a bitter laugh. "It was just a trip. You're overreacting." I turned to her, my chest tightening. "Overreacting. I covered rent when you couldn't. I gave up vacations, dinners, even sleep to make sure this family stayed afloat. And while I sat in a bare apartment wondering how to stretch my paycheck, you were toasting champagne under Caribbean skies." Her smirk faltered. My father slammed his fist lightly on the table, trying to regain control. "We don't owe you an explanation. Family sacrifices. That's what family does." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. And family doesn't leave one of their own standing alone while they sail away laughing." For the first time, none of them had words. They just stared, caught between indignation and shame. I gathered the papers back into the folder and straightened. "This was the last time. You won't get another dollar, another excuse, another chance to play me. Whatever bond we had. You broke it when you sold me out for sunbathing and cocktails." Their silence followed me as I walked out the door. But in that silence, I heard the truth clearer than ever. I was free. Free from their lies. Free from their games. Free to decide what family meant on my own terms. And yet, as the door clicked shut behind me, a question lingered. What would I do with all this proof? Let it rot in my folder, or use it? The answer came to me like a spark in the dark. I would not let their betrayal stay buried. 2 days passed before I acted. Long enough for my parents to believe my anger might have cooled, long enough for them to return to their routines of denial. But I hadn't cooled. I had sharpened. That morning, I walked into the office of Uncle Raymond, my father's older brother. He was the one who had always bailed my father out of trouble decades ago, the one who still carried the bitterness of old debts never repaid. He listened, silent, as I laid the folder on his desk and spread the evidence before him. His face darkened with every page. They told me they were struggling. Said you were too selfish to help. His jaw tightened. And yet you gave them nearly $3,000. They used it for a pleasure cruise. I nodded. And I have no intention of keeping it hidden. Not anymore. Uncle Raymond leaned back in his chair, eyes calculating. Then let the family know. Every cousin, every aunt, every sibling. If they wanted to use you as a scapegoat, make sure they choke on the truth. That evening, I did just that. I scanned the folder, attached the documents, and wrote a letter. A simple one. No theatrics, no begging. This is where my parents' loyalty lies. Not in hospitals, not in honesty, but in cocktails on the deck of a ship. I will not be silent. Consider this my farewell from the illusion of family. I hit send. Within an hour, replies began to trickle in. Some were filled with shock, others with quiet fury. A cousin wrote, "They asked me for money too. I almost sent it. Thank you for exposing this." Another said, "I always suspected, but seeing it laid out, I'm done with them." By the end of the night, my parents' phone must have been buzzing with calls and accusations. I didn't need to hear their voices to know the walls were closing in. And then came the twist. My sister called me directly, her voice trembling, not with anger this time, but with panic. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad is furious. They're saying you've destroyed their reputation. Everyone's turning against us." I let her words hang in the air before answering, calm as stone. "No," I said. "They destroyed themselves. I just held up the mirror." She tried to protest, but I ended the call. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without the weight of obligation pressing on my chest. My parents had wanted me silent. Instead, I gave them the one thing they feared most: exposure. But revenge, I realized, wasn't just about showing the world their lies. It was about showing them something even harder to swallow. That I didn't need them anymore. And soon, I'd prove it in a way that would leave them speechless. A week later, they came to me. Not with apologies. Not with remorse. But with desperation thinly veiled as pride. I was sipping coffee at a cafe downtown when my father's shadow fell across the table. My mother followed, her face pale and tight, my sister trailing behind like a scolded child. "We need to talk," my father said. His voice was low, brittle, the authority he once wielded stripped bare. I gestured to the empty chair. "Go ahead." My mother leaned forward, her hands trembling as she gripped her designer purse. "You've humiliated us. The family, the church, the neighbors. Everyone knows what you did." "No," I corrected, my voice steady. "Everyone knows what you did. I simply refuse to hide it." My sister bristled, but my father silenced her with a look. Then he tried a different approach. The one he thought might still work. "You're making a mistake cutting us off," he said. "We're your blood. Families fight, families betray, but in the end they forgive. You need us. And whether you admit it or not, we still need you." I set down my cup and looked at him with the calm of someone who had already won. "No," I said softly. "You don't need me. You need my silence. You need my money. But you will never again have either." For a moment, there was nothing but the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation around us. My father's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening against the table. My mother's eyes shone with a mix of anger and shame. My sister looked like she wanted to scream. But I didn't flinch. "You took my kindness and called it weakness," I continued. "You stole my money and called it family duty. You erased me from your love while using me as your lifeline. That era ends today." I stood, gathering my things. "You wanted me invisible. Congratulations. From this moment on, I don't exist to you." And with that, I walked away. They didn't follow. They couldn't. Because deep down, they knew I meant every word. In the weeks that followed, I built my own circle. Friends who valued me, colleagues who respected me, a chosen family forged from honesty instead of obligation. For the first time, I wasn't the scapegoat or the silent provider. I was simply myself. And my parents. Word spread fast. The family they'd leaned on for credibility no longer returned their calls. The cousins who once loaned them money shut their doors. Even their church began to whisper. The cruise they had bought with my money turned into the last indulgence they'd ever take at someone else's expense. Because the truth, once released, doesn't return quietly. It grows, it spreads, and it consumes. And in the end, my revenge wasn't just the exposure, or the severed ties, or the silence I left them with. It was the freedom I found in finally saying no.